Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, October 19th, 2017. Time for another show. We've got the storm clouds gathering in the form of our Skype feed. Greg is lining up the stories for this morning. Everything appears to be going relatively well. I have to get a few clicks here and make sure everything is broadcasting as expected. The president is awake and rage tweeting already, more and more ridiculous every moment. But I think we kind of, I hope we hit a sort of well, I guess it would be like a nadir, not a peak yesterday. But man, the president took it into uncharted territories, as he usually does every day, and we'll continue to see him do each day as time goes on, no doubt about it. Yesterday, I think we really hit a weird spot yesterday in which the president essentially got in Twitter fights, or I guess social media fights, plus regular traditional media fights, with now up to 2-3 more Gold Star families. There was, of course, the Johnson family that he battled with yesterday over whether or not he told them that whether he told the war widow we're talking about here that her husband knew what he had signed up for, which, of course, by the way, in case you're not clear on what he signed up for, it was that thing that Donald Trump wouldn't sign up for even after he graduated from a military academy for high school, and then 5 more times he decided he would also not sign up. But, there was a draft on at the time, and so it's a different situation, of course. And there was a war on as well, and that we sort of have a war going on now. We just won't talk about it. But even that one was a police action anyway. So, okay. Well, we got that one, and then that Twitter war that sort of morphed into a generalized traditional media war as he was asked about this whole thing. And the White House continued to insist that, of course, he continued to insist, I've called everyone, and that was very quickly proven not to be true. Then they sort of, he denied that he said that he knew what he signed up for. He denied using that line. Then, of course, everybody said, I heard you use it. And then he sort of backpedaled. Eventually, the White House said that they would no longer deny that he had used that term, but that the family had misunderstood it. So it was really their fault, and everyone knew it was their fault. But it got worse and worse. I mean, there were, of course, other families that said, I never got a call, and other families, I never got a call. And then there was General Kelly's family, and maybe he said he didn't get a call, maybe not, but he didn't want it to be brought out in public, and it was a good point made during the show yesterday. He wouldn't necessarily have been the one to receive the call. His son's wife likely would have received such a call, but they were certainly included in recognition of the Gold Star families. Heaped up more and more. There was another article, maybe we'll share it later in the day, during the day in which General Kelly apparently expressed some frustration. He was disgusted, he said, that his son's death had become a political football. But, that's going to happen when you work for a disgusting boss. I mean, the ultimate storyline under all of this is that General Kelly wanted to keep these things private, but he made the mistake of making mention at some point in his life to Donald Trump, for whom he works, that this was the situation, and Donald Trump cannot help but blurt such things out if he thinks he can score political points or personal points with them. And you should know better than that. I mean, your whole job is to contain his most childish impulses. You can't tell him anything you want kept secret, or quiet even, or understated, for that matter. He's going to dip it in gold no matter what it is. And then, of course, he's going to crap on it because he's poisonous and he's a horrible human being. He's literally the worst person alive today, I think, and there's really no reason to dispute that. Anyway, it got worse and worse as the day went on. And if you didn't believe me, that he's just the crappiest person alive. And that's not the word I would use for it on Twitter, for instance, where I am uncensored. But as we are welcoming our friends in Rochester at WRFZ, we have to be mindful of our broadcast standards. But he's the worst. He's the worst person in the world. That's basically the case. Why do I come to this conclusion? David Fahrenthold, once again, hits the jackpot with the story here. I don't know whether he reported the story originally, but he was my conduit to it over Twitter, which just goes to show that it's worth following him. I saw the news passed on, and I didn't. I immediately grabbed the first write-up of it, which is actually on CNN, which is too bad because I think it was Washington Post reporting that turned it up, but I don't know. We'll see what CNN claims. Yeah, there we go. And they even linked to the Washington Post report. So maybe I'll just click over to that. Well, let me just tell you what this story is. Trump did make at least one phone call to a grieving family who had lost a relative in uniform in service to the United States. Dan Lamothe, I'm guessing, Lamothe, no capital M or anything like that. Lindsay Beaver, and Eli Rosenberg. God, those crazy names. Where are these people from? They reported on this story yesterday. President Trump, in a personal phone call to a grieving military father. I have to read it rather than just tell you the story because I'm going to go crazy if I tell you the story my way. President Trump, in a personal phone call to a grieving military father, offered him $25,000. Okay, let's just pretend that's not just highly inappropriate. Okay, this is a rich guy appearing to give away money is the way he sort of appears to have empathy. I mean, that's highly inappropriate, I think, in the context of the phone call, but you don't know. I don't know what the situation was. I don't know what the circumstances were. Maybe the article will tell. Maybe there was a compelling reason to do that. But he offers him $25,000 and said he would direct his staff to establish an online fundraiser for the family, but neither happened. The father said. Chris Baldridge, the father of Army Sergeant Dylan Baldridge, said that Trump called his home in Zebulon, North Carolina, a few weeks, okay, after his 22-year-old son and two fellow soldiers were fatally shot by an Afghan police officer on June 10th. So this is June, and then a few weeks later. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you $25,000. Because I heard you're in trouble. Maybe they were in dire financial straits. I don't know. He offers them $25,000 plus to establish an online fundraiser, which we know can be very effective. As a matter of fact, Sergeant Johnson's family just had one established. I don't know whether they established it themselves or in their name. And they were looking for, I guess, college funds for their kids, and they raised something like $500,000, like almost instantly. These can be very powerful. Can be a lot of money. He didn't do either one of them. And then, when the Washington Post got wind of this promise having been made and decided to check up on it yesterday, they said, oh, yeah, we sent the money. Just as Corey Lewandowski had assured everyone that the veterans organizations for which Trump claimed to be raising money rather than attending that one Republican debate where Megyn Kelly was the first of several, I guess, debates that she was moderating. I don't want to be there. I don't want to be in the same room. She's bleeding from wherever. And I'm going to do a fundraiser for veterans instead. And then he never sent any of the money until the Washington Post said, where's your money? Where'd it go? Oh, yeah. And Corey Lewandowski, I already sent it. Not only did I already send it, did he already send it? They already spent it. These organizations already have it and used it to help veterans. No, they didn't. Nothing of the sort. None of the money had been sent. Similarly, what happened to your $25,000? What happened to your online fundraiser? Neither one happened. This effing scumbag guy who's president of the United States, excuse me, everybody, but I had to say it that way. Can you imagine promising the father of a dead soldier $25,000 and then walking away from the obligation and then telling everybody, oh, yeah, I sent it. Oh, the check's in the mail. Really? When did it go out? And, of course, when it had gone out, it went out after he was asked the question, what happened to the money? After the White House got the question. Oh, my God. So, of course, now we wait and see. Was it a personal check? Was it a Trump Foundation check? Was it Stuart Rahr's money? Was it pocketed money left over from the inauguration account? Is it campaign funds? Let's find out. But I don't know whether it matters. There's nothing worse? I mean, I don't know where we're going at this point. I can only imagine how does it go? How does it get worse? Trump blows up the moon. Trump bombs the Great Pyramids. Trump films a P-tape in Arlington Cemetery. What could be worse than what this guy is doing? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's beyond the impeachable stuff. Clearly, the founding fathers never imagined this one. What if the president promises $25,000 to the family of a dead soldier and then walks away from the obligation? Well, then, of course, that's a guy you would tar and feather and probably impeach. But there's no point in putting that in the Constitution. Anyway, he's made good on it now, I guess, and even without it being on Fox and Friends, which is astounding to me. But anyway, as it turns out, more things are happening than just that, although that is the worst thing that the president himself did, I think, yesterday. But we'll see if Greg Dworkin can top it or maybe just wants to say something about the same thing. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning.
The president's a scumbag.
Yeah, well, yes.
Okay, thanks.
A couple of things to clarify.
He's a double scumbag. I'm sorry.
About some of the things you've talked about.
What that would mean. Okay, yes.
Again, I'm happy to be corrected myself. I don't have all of this in front of me. This is from memory. But as I was reading and preparing for the show this morning, I came across a couple of pieces which are of tangential interest.
Okay.
One is that Obama quietly offered money to soldiers who were in dire financial straits. He just didn't talk about it.
Yeah. Well, there's that. I guess Trump, I don't know. Trump must have talked about it in order for there to have been a question. That's true. But
the other side of the coin is, as I understand the story from what I read, the offer was made to a father of and this may be a gender-related Trump kind of thing, but it was an offer made to the father of a soldier who died, who's estranged from the mother, and so death benefits go to the mother, but not the father.
Okay.
Complaining about that to Trump, and I think that's where the offer came from.
That is interesting. I wonder what might have prompted it. And I did see that Obama had.
Would he have been more sympathetic to a mother who called as opposed to a father who called? I don't know. I'm not getting into that, but that's going to be part of the other stuff I'm going to talk about.
I mean, it's a white family too. Might as well put that on the record.
That as well, and that's part of it. And in fact, I think that there's a lot to talk about in terms of Trump lying, being not a great person, how the media is responding to all of this. I think all of that is key. But there's this one piece that I came across this morning, which I just thought helped to put everything in context. It's by Eliana Johnson, conservative writer, who now works for Politico. And it says, Trump keeps his focus on the sideshows. This is toward the very, very bottom of the long list I gave you this morning. Unlike his predecessors, this president sees policy as a diversion from the larger cultural battle he believes he was elected to fight. When you look at it through that prism, a lot of what he does makes sense, including his tweets. If he sees himself as the only reason he got elected is because his rural base wants the culture war, that he's fighting for them,
yes,
it both explains his action and their loyalty.
Okay.
And we say, he doesn't know anything about policy. He's going to get us into a nuclear war. He's going to destroy the healthcare system. He's going to do this policy thing. He's going to do that policy thing. And his base says, I don't care. He's a cultural warrior. He's there to beat up on libtards.
I guess that's certainly one of the better explanations.
I think it's a terrific explanation because I think it's correct.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why he doesn't
know anything about policy. He doesn't have a clue.
No.
He sees it as, why are you distracting me from my tweets? I want to attack people over the NFL. Now, the mistake the media makes is not recognizing this. It's that they think it helps him because they, again, only concentrate on the 35%, 37% of his base who likes this, whereas 2/3 of the country thinks this is awful.
Yeah.
But that 37% loves him. Just ask J.D. Vance, So if that's the kid, by the way, apparently he is in talks with Steve Bannon about his next move.
Yeah, what a super surprising thing to find out that it wasn't just some sort of genuine, heartfelt elegy after all, just trying to inform all the rest of you and open your mind. It was actually just sort of, I meant to
an
be
opening
at Breitbart
salvo so that you can then run for senator or something,
Yeah, or work for
by
Breitbart.
the Mercers.
Yeah. They'll just bring him on board. It was Clinton cash. Before we found out that the Merchers and Bannon were backing it and that it was untrue. It was a shaky thesis to begin with, but now we'll find out that the whole thing was paid for.
Well, in any case, this whole focus on the cultural parts of this, I think, are right on the money. Jonah Goldberg, senior editor of National Review, is quoted in this article. He thinks he was elected on this stuff. This is the stuff he knows how to talk about. This is the stuff that would make the front page of the New York Post. The problem is that the job is still the job.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's not a new phenomenon. There's always been a New York Post, but the paper of record has been the New York Times for a reason. Everybody knows, okay, that's hilarious, but you don't elect the local dummy to be mayor. It's the New York Times is the mayor of the papers, not the Post. Everyone reads it for a chuckle, but knows in the back of their mind, you don't put the Post in charge. Well, maybe it reminds me of the, who was it? The old senator who said, maybe mediocre people need representation too. Yeah. They do. It's just you don't give them the keys.
Yeah. So somebody else who is a longtime listener of the show says to me, the death benefits went to the son's ex-wife. Son had not yet changed beneficiary before he died.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little hesitant about the whole thing. One, because I knew about Obama having offered some money, but keeping it a little bit quieter. And I guess there's some situations in which you might say, well, I'm moved to help. But I don't know if the phone call.
So I don't mind that part of it, and I could sort of understand, but you don't publicize it. And by the way, if you promise something like that, you deliver.
Then you have to do it. You have to give
really
the money.
The thing there.
I mean, the bottom line is that's just, I'm sorry, looks like hell for you when you die territory.
Right. So then this whole thing happens with the Gold Star family.
Don't worry, it might not be real.
And then the representative from Florida, Representative Wilson, says, I know the family. I happened to be there for that call, coincidentally. And Trump was very disrespectful to this family who happens to be black.
As it happens. And
as it happens.
Oliver Willis happens to note that I guess 3 of the families that have come forward to say, by the way, you didn't call everybody because we didn't get calls. They also happen to be black families. I'm sure he's called some black families. There's an awful lot of African Americans in the service, and the bullets don't care what color you are. You're going to get a call. But
Mark Caputo, who I think is the Florida reporter for Politico, I think is fair to say is fairly neutral about this. He doesn't have a dog in this fight, but he does know Representative Wilson, and what he writes is what she says, and what she said is, what the hell? Everybody knows Mr. Trump's a liar.
Yes.
Representative Wilson says in response to Trump claiming she fabricated a conversation between him and a Gold Star widow. She says he's a liar. The only person he cares about is himself. What can I say? I can waste time talking about this man all day long, and it's not going to change him. He doesn't know how to be president.
Yes.
And then Caputo adds, Trump didn't seem to know Sergeant LaDavid Johnson's name.
Yeah.
And then adds, here's why Representative Wilson took Trump's conversation with Johnson's widow so personally. He graduated from her 5,000 Role Models of Excellence program. Caputo adds, life is hard for so many kids in Miami-Dade, and Sergeant LaDavid Johnson was no exception, but he was exceptional. Every day called a woman who raised him a son just so he could say he loved her. This is a story he wrote in Politico. And he had earlier said, I know Representative Johnson. I've never seen her lie.
Wilson, yeah.
Representative Wilson. Yeah, and I've never seen her lie. So you have a he said, she said from somebody who admittedly is not a Trump fan.
Yeah.
But there's witnesses. And then so the media takes this and says, this is kind of a big deal. We're having a hard time getting rid of this because Trump himself keeps, belaboring the point.
Yes.
And bringing it back up. Aaron Blake writing in the Washington Post this morning, says, in other words, Trump brought this issue up on his own accord, even when he hadn't called some of the very few relative to his predecessor's new Gold Star families he's seen lose loved ones on his watch. While more than 2,500 service members were killed in action during Obama's tenure, only 20 have died in Trump's first 9 months.
Okay.
So for him to have skipped anybody,
right,
given that there's only 20 of them, is pretty remarkable right there. Then he claimed proof that his own White House admits he doesn't have.
Yes.
Then he rehashed the death of his own chief of staff's son, suggesting Obama didn't call Kelly when his son was killed in Afghanistan. Kelly hasn't commented, but we now know that Kelly was invited to a Gold Star family breakfast and actually sat at Michelle Obama's table.
Yeah.
So you don't need to call somebody when they're sitting next to you. Put the White House in the position of disputing the accounts of the Gold Star families. That was Sarah Huckabee Sanders' whole press conference yesterday. And then Blake adds, if you think any of these things are planned, you're kidding yourself. And these are not distractions. He also talks about the healthcare fiasco. If anything, they cast even more light on Republicans' failure to restructure healthcare in the situation in Niger, about which Senator McCain has alleged Trump administration isn't being forthcoming. So there's no game plan on any of this, Blake writes. It's Trump simply floating from one controversy to the next and making things worse by flying off the handle and saying untrue things. In other words, he's lying. Trump's controversies are usually at least within the realm of plausible deniability. These examples just seem totally careless and haphazard. So the press is approaching this particular one. Here's one from The Hill, which is a good stick your finger in the wind and see how things are going. The memo, Gold Star controversy consumes White House, and it's all about allies of the president are expressing weary frustration at yet another distracting controversy, but they can't get away from this. And part of the reason that they can't get away from this is that things and people that Trump had picked on before, whether it's Hillary Clinton or John McCain, are politicians. It's their job. You can't not, have a problem with this. This is something that they're going to approach. On the other hand, he's picking on non-politicians who didn't want any part of the political mess, and he took them on by name. They didn't volunteer. He brought it up, and that's part of the reason why there's such pushback. The other, of course, is it happened to be the military and Gold Star families and stuff which is pretty dicey to make into a political football in the first place. But when you do it to people who didn't volunteer for it, and when you do it to people who are otherwise normal, average, everyday Americans who in this particular case happen to be serving their country and protecting us, you can't run from that. And so this may be, as Eliana Johnson says, part of his approach to the culture wars. He blew this one.
I guess so. I mean, I don't really know what. It's interesting that you brought up the idea of can't get away from it, or can't leave it behind, can't get away from it. I was thinking he can't get away. This guy, he can't get away with it. He can't get away from it. He can't get away at all. And I don't know. Everybody else seems to be getting bogged down by this one. But I
don't mean get away with it. I mean, you say something and then people say that's not true, and you fact check. But what he's doing is he's trying to make it not a controversy. He's trying to turn it to be some sort of, you guys are fake newsing, making stuff up, and let's go back to the culture wars because we know my base hates the media.
Maybe.
And it's not working.
I guess not. Although honestly, I mean, you'd think that it's a good candidate for people who are Trump fans to think it was made up. I mean, it's almost too horribly perfect. The widow's pregnant as well. I mean, this is not this is not risk free here, and he's finding that out. Yes. Well, good. He ought to. It's a horrible thing that he did here. And that's without even getting into the one he offered money and then tried to hide from that and walk away from it.
To be fair, again, I'm being fact-checked in a most wonderful way.
Oh.
People are pointing out to me, Trump didn't talk about the money. What happened is the Washington Post went and found, because there's only 20 of them.
Yeah.
So this is something you can do. So they went and found people and got the story from them. Trump didn't talk about it. In fact, Trump probably didn't want to talk about it because it's not a very good story.
I guess not, although that's usually
so it wasn't Trump saying stuff about the money. It was the Washington Post saying stuff, and now he's stuck. And, of course, now he's going to have to make it into a fake news thing, except like you pointed out, when you're forced to admit you didn't do something and you're forced to do something, he hates it because, of course, he's not nearly as rich as he says he is. And we don't know where the money's coming from, but probably not from his pocket because that's not how he rolls.
No, very rarely. Although I think that there was some hint in the course of the story that it was going to be a personal check, which is really amazing. That's how you know you hit him particularly hard and really found a sore spot
Maybe it's a personal loan with 666 Park Avenue is
maybe that's it.
Collateral.
Boing, that thing's bouncing. Yeah, I don't know. I was surprised to know that they found out about it in the way they did, because that might be something that Trump would actually brag about, but I would have thought I would have seen the headlines about that one. But again, the bottom line is, if you say you're going to do it and then you don't do it until you're caught not having done it, it's been it's June.
You don't get points
August,
for charity.
September,
Let's put it that way.
No, you can't. You lose points. But he's never had any. He's not had a charitable bone in his body for years. It's been decades since we found him showing up without paying and trying to sitting on the dais, displacing donors on the dais at pediatric AIDS fundraisers. I thought that one couldn't be beat, but I think maybe calling a Gold Star father and promising him, "Hey, I'll send you a quick $25,000. What do you think?" And then not doing it, and not setting up the online fundraiser so somebody else could cover your obligations. That's some lazy stuff, man. I got to tell you.
Meanwhile, get it in before the break because it's real quick. Trump tweets this morning, workers of firm involved with the discredited and fake dossier take the fifth. Who paid for it? Russia, the FBI, or the Dems, or all? Karen Tumulty of the Washington Post notes, so this is an astonishing allegation by a president of the United States against the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Essentially, what he's doing is accusing the Democrats, the FBI, and Russia all being in collusion against him in a conspiracy. And amazing. I pointed out to Karen, when Trump accuses somebody, he generally has done it himself.
Yes, that is true, too. And as was pointed out, we'll talk a little bit more about it perhaps after the break. Nobody took the fifth. They were challenging the validity of the subpoena that Devin Nunes, who's already compromised in all this and should have been recused, issued on his own and with no agreement from anybody else. We'll pick it up after the break, though.
I'm nominating it for worst things Trump's done in the last 24 hours.
Good morning and welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. We had a nice musical interlude here and just discussing what else we have about the dotard in chief and what else he's up to. Plus the rest of the cast and crew, the supporting cast and crew, we ought to call them, of course, of the Republican Party, all have their own problems. Let's run down their list here, Greg.
Well, there's a couple of interesting ones. For example,
those are the ones we want. Yes.
Yeah. Here's one from the New York Times. Alexander Burns and Jonathan Martin signaling frustration. Senior House Republican plans to quit early. He's not just retiring. That is to say, not going to rerun, not going to re-up. He's quitting. In a sign of mounting frustration among Republicans in Washington, Representative Pat Tiberi of Ohio, and before you get too excited about it, this is a solid Republican district. Mm-hmm. A senior lawmaker who had close ties to his party's leaders is expected to resign and take up an executive post with a business group in his home state. An abrupt departure by Mr. Tiberi, who is an influential member of the House Ways and Means Committee, would signal a deepening level of discontent among mainstream Republicans in Congress. This is what happens when Roy Moore looks like he's going to win. Despite holding, basically, David Duke is running for senator in Alabama and is going to win.
Yes.
That's basically what you have down there. And so a lot of Republicans in Congress say, I don't know if I want to work in this environment.
Yeah.
Despite holding Congress and the White House, Republicans have so far failed to achieve longstanding policy goals, yada, yada. It's difficult for people who really see their job as governing when there's been no governance for 8 years and the horizon has even less.
Yeah.
And what do you do when you retire? Well, here's one about Josh Chaffetz, Jason Chaffetz, Jason in the House, who's not in the House anymore. For Chaffetz and other Fox News hosts, Hillary Clinton's shadow presidency never ends because you always can talk about something. Benghazi, Clinton Foundation, some nonsense to divert things away from Trump's policy failures because, once again, Eliana Johnson, I think, is right on the money here. This is all about cultural wars.
Yeah. What an odd thing. The shadow presidency thing, they really are, they're loving that for whatever reason. But she's walking in the woods. That woman just won't go
away. She just won't shut up. What is wrong with her?
No, she's not doing anything. Not only that, of course, then of course
Oh, yeah,
there's
she's
other
not
people
doing
saying
it. I forgot about that.
she should
She's not
step
running,
up. She
she's
should
not
be
in public
saying
office
this
anymore.
or that. And then when she's, we need her comment on Harvey Weinstein. Okay, here's a comment. God, shut up, go away.
And lastly,
whatever,
here's
man.
a piece from Politico noting that frail and disoriented Tad Cochran says he's not retiring.
He's not retiring. The other one is.
Yeah, the guy who's young and totally intact is leaving, and the fellow here who's having some issues, health issues, is staying. The Mississippi senator faces questions on whether he can continue as chairman of the Appropriations Committee. That's like a big deal.
Yes.
That committee.
Yes.
There's some committees in Washington that don't matter, and there's some that really matter. Ways and Means and Appropriations and Senate Finance, for example, come to mind as mattering.
Right, and you should again to reiterate, Tiberi, who's not only stepping down but doing so now, I guess, is a member of the House Ways and Means Committee, a Republican, conservative Ways and Means member, leaving in the middle of the tax reform, quote unquote tax reform fight, just taking off, not going to be there to vote for it. Yeah,
right.
I hang on. I'll tolerate almost anything from Trump in order to get the tax cuts. You know what? Screw the tax cuts. I'm leaving. Wow. Okay.
So Brian Beutler was writing. He's now at Crooked Timber. He's not at the Republic anymore.
Right.
And he's writing there. Has this great story called "The Seeds of Media Self-Sabotage."
Mm-hmm.
The Republican Party's submission to Donald Trump and his victory in last year's election have produced endless material for hypocrisy watchdogs to chew on. Hypocrisy has become the media's watchword for the tactics and reversals conservatives have undertaken in response to the unexpected rise of a historically unscrupulous president. And, part of the reason that the hypocrisy is one of the things that people focus on, of course, is that, if for example, you're pro-life but pay your staff that you're having affairs with to have abortions, it doesn't look so good.
No.
And such a thing has happened. But at the same time, again, part of the reason that we see so much whataboutism is because it's trying to outline the hypocrisy. Well, Trump did this. What about that time that Obama did that? What about the time Bill Clinton did that? Or Rutherford B. Hayes did this other thing over here.
He did.
It's not relevant, but, you got to divert the charge and water it down by saying, well, other people do it too. And this other people do it too is what the media does. And sometimes they flat out say it, watering down their own response. A perfect example is Trump lying. Why can't they just say Trump lied about that? Well, politicians are always stretching the truth. This is something different. That's really the thrust of Beutler's piece here, and I think he's right. He says, for instance, in explaining last week why Sean Hannity had once called Julian Assange an enemy of the U.S., but now, thanks to Assange in kind support for Donald Trump, proposes a U.S. government WikiLeaks alliance, CNN's Dana Bash calls it classic politics.
Yeah.
This is why Americans look at Washington, look at the media, Fox included, and say event or issue A is fine when the Republicans are in charge, but not when the Democrats are in charge, and vice versa. Both parties do it.
Okay.
Now, rather than belabor false equivalence, he says, Brian Beutler says, I want to focus on the category error that makes this particular kind of false equivalence possible, because if it goes uncorrected, it's going to clear the path by which illiberal forces in America ultimately prevail. It isn't that Sean Hannity and scores of other oily Trump apparatchiks aren't daily engaged in brazen hypocrisy. They are. It's the concept of hypocrisy doesn't capture the conservative media's driving ethic in all its ugliness. Lumping the methods of Trump apologists into the same critical framework as classic politics. And here I'm thinking of Jeffrey Lord on CNN, or Corey Lewandowski on CNN, or Kate McInerney, or some of the other, or Tommy Longren, whatever her name is. Who basically spew stuff that just has no basis in fact whatsoever. Lumping the methods of Trump apologists in the same critical framework as classic politics creates a parity between agitprop and honest discourse that propagandists will exploit until most people can't tell the difference. It will allow insidious disinformation to chew away at the institutions of journalism and academic expertise until the enlightened foundations of an informed citizenry collapse. To me, that's like you hire Hugh Hewitt for comment.
Yeah, okay.
It's not commentary. It's not analysis. It's not conservative point of view. I'm going to defend no matter what, because frankly, I want conservative judges, and I'll sell my soul to get that. I don't really care about the rest of it.
Yes, largely true. I'm not certain I understand the difference between false equivalence and a category error. That's what I thought. I thought false equivalence was a category
Dana
error.
Bash is saying, look, Sean Hannity is just doing the same kind of politics that Rachel Maddow does. It's the same thing. It's false equivalence to say such a thing. But it's worse than that, because Maddow is attempting to analyze it from a liberal point of view. And if you had an honest conservative these days, let's just pick somebody, Charlie Sykes or David Frum, who's trying to analyze it from a conservative point of view, you could say, okay, those things are on equal footing. Mm-hmm. But Hannity and propaganda and lying about facts is not the same thing at all. And you can't say, okay, both sides are doing this because Maddow and Hannity, they're not equal.
No.
They're not doing the same thing. One is trying to analyze from a particular perspective using facts, and the other one is literally propaganda.
Yes. Well, I agree with all of it. I don't understand.
And if you make them equal, you're elevating the propaganda. To put it in a simpler way, I was upset years ago, and still am upset, when mainstream reporters treat Fox News as if it's just the same as all the other networks. Now, it may be for them because it's a place you get a job.
Right.
But it's not. They don't do this. It's not the same. And you should get upset about the way that Fox News covers stuff. And you shouldn't treat them as a legitimate news outlet when, in fact, it's not. And that's, if you put it in those terms, you can understand why Beutler makes the distinction.
I did. Well, yes. I mean, I understand the objection, and I agree. I've always agreed about Fox News. Basically what we have here is they have a building. They own cameras. The people they put on camera are supposed to wear suits or dresses and skirts. By the way, only skirts and dresses for the ladies. No pants allowed. But that's because that's meant to give it the appearance of a news operation, and that's all. And for people who work in news operations, I don't know. I wear a suit. I get on a camera. They give me a check. It's the same thing. That's a category error. But all I'm saying is category error is false equivalence. That's what it means. I don't know. I don't understand how he's using the two terms differently. There are bad comparisons,
he puts it this
and then
way.
there's
he
category
put it this
errors.
way. We would be better off as a political culture in a country if conservative media mirrored liberal media in its relative commitment to empiricism and fair-mindedness. While we can't control the way Trump's enablers conduct themselves, we should recognize they pocket unearned credibility when we collapse the moral distinction between partisan hypocrisy and concerted propaganda, treating their illiberal commitments as classic politics.
Yes.
Again, you can't treat Fox News as just news from another angle. That's not what it is.
Right.
Predictable, if regrettable, partisan behavior, unseemly but typical behavior of ideologues. That's not what's going on here. And so people like Steve Bannon and, folks like Trump just take advantage of that and say, well, I am doing something that is completely, totally legitimate because look how Fox News covers it. In fact, Trump uses Fox and Friends as the basis for his planning the day.
Yes.
It's propaganda, and we need to see it for what it is and call it for what it is.
I'll agree with all of that. I guess another category error and or false equivalence, however you want to term it. I'll just throw this in there. Not that it was you that did it. You're just reading me the report. But a report that says, well, President Obama offered people money too. Well, yeah, but what we're talking about here is not following through. You said President Trump promised somebody money and then walked away from the obligation, did not follow through. But, both sides do it. I mean, he did the opposite over here. Obama promised money and then gave it to the people. But the point is money was promised. No, the point is that money was not delivered. It was promised and not delivered because Trump is a congenital liar. And
that's the thing, right? Welching on your commitments is something Trump does all the time.
I stayed away from that term. I'm not certain whether are Welsh people upset about that?
I don't know.
I'll have to ask him about that one. I don't know any Welsh people. I don't think.
I'm
Maybe I do.
old,
How
and
can I
those
tell?
terms come to mind because
Yeah.
that's what I learned as a
No,
kid.
I did it too. I mean, I said.
Did somebody
and then
complain?
walked. No, but I don't know. I used to drink Welsh Farms milk as a child, and I'm very upset.
All right. Well,
So
I think in
local
this
dairy
particular
for-
case, I'll wait for somebody to complain.
Okay, I think you have to be a very specific kind of Northeasterner, I think, to remember Welsh Farms. But okay, Welch's
anyway.
grape juice is also upset.
So again, it's all in a context. I think that's important. It goes back again to the larger big picture, the Eliana Johnson piece there. That if you're looking at this as a cultural war, then you're going to see Trump's actions in a different way. You're going to see Fox News' action in a different way. You're going to see the inability to agree on common facts in a different way. And I think it drives a lot of Trump's approach to everything. But certainly, you have to, in addition to that, it isn't just calculated, I'm going to be a cultural warrior, is that whenever it touches Trump personally, he is a chaos agent who just lashes out, especially if he thinks you've criticized him. The fascinating thing is that whatever he accuses you of, he probably did himself. And in this particular case, I think he picked an issue that's just not going to help him. I don't think it's going to help him with his base to pick on the military and have Gold Star families upset. I don't think it's going to hurt him, but I don't think it's going to help him. And that's, maybe the bigger theme to all of this. Nothing Trump does has recruited people for his cultural war. He's got the people who were behind him in the first place, but he's never one iota expanded that group. And if anything, he does things here and there and in other places to shrink it, which is why Republicans are getting so nervous about November 2018. That's why so many people are retiring. And with that, I will call it quits for today. I'm a quitter. I'm leaving.
Okay.
I'm out. I'm done.
You and Sarah Palin.
Yeah. I'm not going to finish my full term of the 2-hour show. I'm just leaving now. This is Greg Dorkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning, who occasionally lets me get a word in edgewise during my segment. Yeah. That's satire, actually. I don't let him get a word in edgewise. But I always enjoy speaking with him. It's always fun. And he'll be here tomorrow, and I'll be back on Monday.
Yes. Okay. Very good. I can handle that. Thanks, Greg.
Good. Left you some stuff if you want to talk about it.
Thank you. Always. I always need more things for the show. It goes on after
always
this.
More things.
Right.
I think the fact that Obamacare fixes in the end may actually make it into the final end of year legislation is interesting, because I think Republicans know they can't run away from this.
They're trying to get away with all sorts of things. But they may insert that into the budget. They're supposed to finish up the budget today.
Any
the
day
Votorama.
now. Any day now.
Should be today. This is the day.
Right. Take care. We'll talk.
All right. Very good. Thanks, Greg. Technically, it may not be the day. They may finish after midnight. That often happens with budgets. And by the way, yes, you can just offer up thousands of amendments and semi-filibuster a budget resolution to death by just making people stay 24/7 around the clock until they can't take it anymore. But it's more than a talking filibuster. It's a voting filibuster, and it doesn't last forever, and it doesn't have the same results as filibusters usually do. That is to say, killing the bill. It just makes it more unpleasant once it actually has passed, but no indication that they are likely to do such a thing. It may be that certain pathways towards bipartisan fixes, such as the type discussed as between Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray, may find their way via amendment into this budget document. It won't matter. It's a perfect vehicle for doing it. I say it won't matter because what I mean is it won't involve Trump, and it won't involve a fight with Trump, and Trump won't veto it because the budget doesn't go to the president for signature. It's not binding law. So it's a good place for Congress to go on the record about what they intend to do. I don't know if it's absolutely necessary that it be taken care of in this document, but the fact that it's in the offing tells you a little bit about the nerves among Republicans on Capitol Hill who want to return in the next Congress. Okay, we can kind of leave it at that. Anyway, I'm still a little bit confused about the I don't know. Maybe offline I'll have to read a little bit more through Brian Beutler's piece. I usually will take the time to do that with his pieces. He's become more and more of a media-focused critic. I mean, he's a general critic, of course, of everything, but it's not bad work, I must say. I know Jay Rosen is usually a big fan of what Brian Beutler is writing on the question of media, and they seem to agree on those points. This one, I'm having difficulty grasping the difference between, I understand, why it's a bad thing, but I'm not certain that, in my view, and maybe I've just been using the wrong definitions, that false equivalence, I thought a false equivalence was false because it exhibited at least one kind of category error. That is, false modifies equivalence. The equivalence you're suggesting doesn't actually exist because it instead evidences a category error. You have lumped two different categories together and pretended that they were equivalent when they're not. As opposed to just, I don't think that comparison is apt because, one person had a reason for doing it that rings true to me and the other person did not. And that could be hypocrisy, or that could just be differing circumstances, and I'm distinguishing between the two cases, and you can distinguish between the two cases convincingly or unconvincingly, but it's not necessarily category error to make that distinction. It could rise to the level of category error, in which case it would be a false equivalence. So, I don't know. Maybe I misunderstand how far Brian is going with distinguishing between the two terms and how he uses them. But that's something I guess we can clear up off the air, and maybe we'll return to it, maybe or not. I don't know, but he's got larger points being made. I think the one I have seized upon here is relatively minor, and I can and should let it go because the rest of the article seems to make pretty good points. So we'll take it for that and move on. Okay. I don't know. Once again, falling behind on all the incredibly ridiculous stories that are out there. Let's do them in reverse chronological order in which they appear in my Pocket folder here, because I think that reflects some of the immediacy of it. Okay, before we go to Pocket, though, one thing I wanted to clear up, it was Renato Mariotti, who's got that fantastic name. And though it is clearly foreign in origin, I guess, although I don't know whether he is, it's a fabulous one, and I'm pleased to be able to pronounce it relatively well, and it just rolls off the tongue. Renato Mariotti, whose name we have called on the show before, is the one who was responsible for the tweet regarding Donald Trump's anger tweet about taking the fifth and the fake dossier, etc. Workers of the firm involved with the discredited and fake dossier take the fifth. Who paid for it? Russia, the FBI, or the Dems, or all? In addition to Karen Tumulty's excellent point about the fact that a sitting president is alleging a conspiracy theory involving the FBI and Russia and the Democrats, Renato reminds us, no, they didn't take the Fifth Amendment. They challenged the subpoena issued by Devin Nunes on his own. Also, the dossier has been partially confirmed. So, true and good points. Pocket. What did I put away? Okay. Shift gears. Stop in our tracks for this story, because this is a story you should be spending today, tomorrow, the weekend talking about. This is something where we can do a little bit here. We can do a little bit of work and help things out. Judd Legum and Danielle McLean at Think Progress point out for us, these wealthy institutions are quietly financing white nationalism. Wouldn't you like to know who's doing that? Here's the setup. The connection between Breitbart, a far-right website, and the white nationalist movement was hardly a secret. Steve Bannon, who served as executive chairman of the publication before and after serving as Trump's chief strategist, called Breitbart, quote, the platform for the alt-right, a euphemism for white nationalists and their sympathizers. Well put, of course. Judd's not afraid of that, and neither's Danielle, clearly. Anyway, these extreme bigoted viewpoints are frequently reflected in the site's writing, which has included anti-immigrant screeds, sensationalized reporting of black crime, quote-unquote black crime, and other fringe viewpoints and conspiracy theories. But a recent expose published by BuzzFeed News revealed in stunning detail Breitbart's deep connection and collaboration with white nationalists. We read it. We discussed it here on the air. It was the one about how Milo Yiannopoulos and the alt-right actually sort of smuggled neo-Nazi viewpoints into Breitbart. Of course, it wasn't much of a smuggling operation. It was by design and in collusion with Bannon, who frequently would berate Yiannopoulos for not doing enough of it, despite the fact that occasionally they had to berate Yiannopoulos for being too obviously racist and anti-Semitic. But anyway, the point is we can actually shorten this article, which deserves plenty of attention and a full reading, but we sometimes get bogged down in these things. We can shorten it by we'll skip the whole front part. Breitbart is a racist publication. It's a neo-Nazi publication. It's an alt-right publication. Call it what you want. That's what they're doing. It was purposeful. That was the whole idea of it. And you know very well that it is paid for. I don't know whether it's in its entirety, but certainly in the majority. The majority of the funding it takes to pay the people to sell their souls to do this work comes from the Mercer family. Robert Mercer, his daughter Rebecca, and of course we've been over and over how Mercer money has bought the entirety of and paid for the entirety of Steve Bannon's quote-unquote political career. He is a miserable loser who has no political grounding whatsoever, but for that which the Mercers bought for him. His entire resume of political genius is essentially the record of bought followers for him. It's the equivalent of bought Twitter followers. I'm a huge success on Twitter. I'm a huge success on Facebook. I bought followers. I bought an audience, and I bought coverage in the newspaper that would say I'm a political genius for producing political films like Clinton Cash, which were themselves bought and paid for by the Mercers. They've just created this guy out of whole cloth and said he's a political genius, and we're going to attach him to Donald Trump. Anyway, point being, Breitbart, racist publication, paid for by the Mercers. Mercers made the bulk of the money that they're using on their political operations as through Robert's work as CEO, or it says here co-CEO, of Renaissance Technologies, or Rentech, as they say here, a quantitative hedge fund that uses computer algorithms to make investment decisions. The fact that it uses computers, kind of secondary, although it helps explain. It's all explainable by the fact that Robert Mercer actually got his start in computers at IBM. So he's a bit of a computing savant, and he decided to apply that to the biggest money-making operation you could think of, hedge funds, which, of course, we have discussed also previously on the program, don't really do a particularly good job at helping clients invest. Instead, they make this is sort of like the way Donald Trump is a businessman. He's a big businessman. I have business experience. That's why you need me in the White House. And people think, oh, business experience, that means big business, that means Fortune 500, that means publicly owned, that means reporting to a board, that means balancing books, etc. When in fact the Trump organization runs opposite the way all of that works when people think about big business. It's big, he's got a gigantic everything, right, except hands, and who knows what else, but, just saying. Anyhow, it's a family business, what he runs, and he reports to no one, and he's responsible to no one, and he's, of course, responsible in no way for anything ever. Plus, he's a big money loser, and we've learned along the way that if he had basically put the money his father gave to him in his will in a bank account somewhere, he'd be richer now than he is today. But whatever. Okay, fine, right? Similarly, hedge funds in general. That's like the glamour job on Wall Street, and everybody talks about hedge funds this, hedge funds that. You got to be in hedge funds. you got to be directing a hedge fund, because everybody looks here and says, well, hedge fund managers are the richest people on Wall Street. They're among the richest people in the world. They're literally billionaires. So it must be a great investment vehicle, right? No, it's not. People who invest in hedge funds don't make a tremendous amount of money out of it. They make a tremendous amount of money compared to you and me because they start with a tremendous amount of money and make more because it's not money losing. But another story we read here on the air was about the settling of the bet with who's the big sensible billionaire out there? The Hathaway guy. Warren Buffett, right? He made a bet with a hedge fund manager. I bet that investing your money in a fund linked to a stock index like the Dow or the S&P 500 will do better for you long term over a period of, say, 10 years than any hedge fund you want or any basket of hedge funds that you care to put together. And he challenged all the hedge fund managers. You can even put your own hedge fund in the basket. I bet I'll beat you with an S&P 500 fund. And he did. He clobbered them. They gave up a year early. They paid off the bet because hedge funds suck. The only thing hedge funds are good for is making hedge fund managers rich. That's what the Mercers have done. Again, they're fake businessmen too. But we'll return to why that's important after this break. And welcome back. Oh, I almost forgot that we're on the short break on this one. I got involved in reading some of the fantastic stories that we have lined up for you and getting ahead of myself, of course, because I first need to return not only to turning down the music, and thankfully, this is where you really find the value of having a human being on the other end of the line, like Justice. Thank you for being a human being, Justice, and reminding me, oh, by the way, you're back from the break. I hope you all enjoyed the music. I did, clearly, as well as the rest of my reading. But when we left off, I was telling you something you probably already know. Hedge funds suck as an investment. They are fantastic as hedge fund managers because they take exorbitant fees. By the way, part of the reason that they can take exorbitant fees is that the people who invest in hedge funds are almost certain that they are going to make a killing because, of course, they're going to make a killing. Hedge funds, one, are designed for making killings, and two, they are run by people who are making killings with hedge funds. But you know what's happened here? Just to tie a couple of stories together. The investors are making a category error. There's a false equivalence, you see, between being a successful investor in a hedge fund as a client of a hedge fund and being a successful investor in a hedge fund as the manager of a hedge fund. The manager of a hedge fund gets to take sometimes something like 20% of the value of the portfolio that he's managing for people, win or lose. If you invest in my hedge fund, I'm such a genius, you got to pay me 15, 20% of the value of what you're investing with me year to year to keep me on board managing your money for you. A guaranteed income for the hedge fund manager, win or lose. Not so, of course, for the investors. And as it turns out, they're going to make about 2%, which you can do with a certificate of deposit. I think still, if they still even offer them anywhere, you can make 2% on almost anything. But the hedge fund managers are going to take 7, 8, 9% net, and maybe even more when you're talking about certainly with their gross fees, and they are gross. But they're getting clobbered by the S&P 500 funds, as Buffett suggested. You remember the story. They were taking hedge fund investors were getting 2%. S&P was returning 7+% for people year to year. Meanwhile, hedge fund managers are taking twice what the S&P is getting you. They're rich, and the investors are not worse off. They haven't lost any money, but they've gained very little. But what do you win? You win the point of pride of saying, I'm invested in Renaissance Technologies. Wow, Renaissance Technologies, that's run by Robert Mercer. He's a computational genius. He's one of those quantitative fund guys. He's rolling in it. He's so rich. I got to get in on this. The point is, he's not letting you in on it. He's just using your money to make more for himself. Considerably more than you're making. Anyway, everybody knows this by now, but I wanted to reiterate it because it's such a goddamn scam. I can't believe it exists. But it does exist partially because the only people he suckers are people who are rich enough to be able to put up the minimum necessary to invest in a fund like that. And these are a very special case. In business law and securities law, these are very sophisticated. They're considered sophisticated investors. Why? I don't know. They chose to make 2% when they could be making 7% over the counter with protections that are not available to the so-called sophisticated investors. The SEC is very much less inclined to regulate investments that are meant solely for essentially high rollers and so-called sophisticated investors versus, something you and I, if we had any money to play with, might buy off the street. Okay, I'm going to get a Charles Schwab account and I'm going to buy a money market fund and I'm not going to touch it because I don't know anything, but I know that they'll at least have some fiduciary duty to do well by me and return me something. And that fiduciary duty, it doesn't produce wild profits because they can't over speculate. So I'm not going to get 18, 19, 20% returns like hedge fund managers take, but I will get 4 to 7%. And that's pretty good. Besides which, you don't have to know very much in order to do it. You just hook it up to a S&P index fund and you'll be fine, as Warren Buffett proved. Okay, they're not going to hit the jackpot for me and bring me 20%, but that's because they're restricted from doing so. They know, the government knows you're dealing with people who aren't particularly sophisticated investors. You're not selling a sophisticated and unique financial instrument. So fine, you have fiduciary duty to your investors. It's going to result in lower returns, but it's safe. That's where people want their retirement money. If you want to play the game and you want to risk it all, fine. There's a category of investments for you. If you're a rich, sophisticated investor and you want to bet it all, in the hopes that you'll get a 20% return or better, 800% return if you really go crazy, right? You find something and you really hit the jackpot. That's the risk and reward game will allow you to play it. Ironically, what that ends up doing is enabling hedge fund managers to take exorbitant fees to suck out all the profits that are available, or practically all the profits, and leave the table scraps for the investors so that they don't leave because they're not seeing negative balances come back. Okay? I think we've cleared that up. So basically, the big background here, Bannon's career bought and paid for, it's fake, paid for by the Mercers. Breitbart's base of support, fake, paid for by the Mercers. We can talk all the rest of the day about how the Russians are helping them do that. Maybe we'll get to that, maybe we won't. Anyway, Breitbart, fake, but an alt-right platform at that. In addition to all of that, bad enough all by itself, plus it's fake. Mercer's money, virtually fake. I mean, he gets to enjoy it. That's true. There's nothing fake about that. But the investors who think they're getting rich off of his brilliant investment schemes, that's a fake. So who are these idiotic investors? Well, it turns out they are people that we should care about. And they're people that we ordinarily would support, or people we ordinarily might, or institutions we might ordinarily think of as relatively liberal. That's where we come in. We should be saying to these people, not only should you should not be investing in Renaissance technologies even if you're making 20%. It's dirty money. Get away from it. On top of it, this all makes a lot more sense if you tell them, look, you're not, I don't think, making this kind of money. You're not getting it. Mercer is getting it, and he's getting it because of a mistake of the tax code that he's lobbying furiously, not only to keep, but to expand. But we touched on that the other day as well. But you should be demanding the divestment from Renaissance Technologies of the following institutions. That is the point. That's the reason I brought up this Think Progress article. This is the value of it. Are we ready? Okay. So we know what they're doing over there at Breitbart. We know how they're doing. We know how disgusting it is. We know how bad a bet hedge funds are for investors. Who's doing it? Think Progress identified 10 nonprofits, university endowments, and public retirement funds that currently invest in Renaissance Technologies funds, according to the latest available public report. We contacted all of them to confirm their investment and asked if they had any concerns about investing in funds run by Mercer, who was using the profits to fund Breitbart and Yiannopoulos and more. I added the and more because Bannon. And yeah, Breitbart is rolled up into, or Bannon's rolled up in Breitbart. We might as well separate him out there and say, Steve Disgusting Carbuncle Bannon is financed by these investments. Institutions that did not respond to their inquiries, they say, could have divested their holdings since the last public accounting. If they did, fantastic. If they didn't, they should. And if you're on this list, you should be working on this today before lunch. Neither Robert Mercer nor a representative for Renaissance Technologies, by the way, responded to requests for comment. Why would they? This is about how terrible they are. The Public Schools Employees Retirement System of Missouri. Good morning. Are you listening? Is anyone in Missouri listening? Public Schools Employee Retirement System of Missouri. By the way, what do you think Robert Mercer thinks of public school employees and their retirement system? Well, here's what they're doing. Since 2007, Renaissance Technologies has managed $877 million for the Public Schools Employee Retirement System of Missouri through the hedge fund's Institutional Equity Fund, according to Executive Director Steve Yoakum. The Renaissance investment is a significant portion of the nearly $42 billion retirement fund, which pays for Missouri public school teachers, employees, and their families' retirement, disability, and survivor benefits. If you would like to have enough money to pay for that stuff, get out of hedge funds because there's no money in it for you. Despite Mercer's role in financing white nationalist activity, Yoakum said the retirement fund has no plans to divest from the quant hedge fund. Frankly, the attractiveness, they have done a very good job for us, and it is a strategy that is not very common, said Yoakum. They have really given us exemplary returns for us since we started. I would fact check that if I were you, especially if you are a public employee retiree in Missouri. As for Mercer's reported ties to white nationalism, those are things that don't interest us, he said. Oh, really? We don't look at those things when we make those investments. He added that the company's founder, James Simons, is a large Democrat donor. It's Democratic. Thank you. We look at how do they invest money? Do they invest it well? What are their returns? What are their fees? And the economic aspects. You can find a better one. You can find better in the S&P 500. Warren freaking Buffett says so. Read the effing newspaper, Yoakum. Next up. Columbia University. It's 10 a.m. at Columbia University. You're awake. Anybody listening? Are you on campus? Are you in the city? Can you make it to Columbia University? Can you get to the administration building before lunch? They need to be divesting. You know they're thinking about divesting elsewhere. They're used to this sort of protest. They respond to this sort of protest. It takes a while. Let's talk to them. It is unclear, they write in Think Progress, how much money Columbia University's endowment is committed in Renaissance Technology funds, but a February 28th Wall Street Journal article outlining Harvard University's plan to reverse its endowment's poor returns highlighted that Columbia University's approach included drug royalty streams, litigation finance funds, and quantitative hedge funds such as Renaissance Technologies and the D.E. Shaw Group. Several Columbia University trustees overseeing the fund did not return calls or declined to comment, and I can understand why. It's a crappy investment, and it's a socially miserable thing to do. I'd be embarrassed too, and I'd wait on returning those phone calls until I could think of, all right, where are we going to land? Okay, I can accept the delay. Officials from the university also declined to comment, citing university policies against publicly discussing investments. I'm not in a position to make any further comment or offer any further information, said Robert Hornsby, a university spokesman. We publish what we publish in the annual report, and we don't really discuss specific investments. It's sort of standard practice because you get embarrassed very frequently, and there will be things that people will try to embarrass you into divesting in, which are perhaps controversial to a smaller number of people, but that might not necessarily merit rising to the level of divestment, although the activists committed to the divestment surely believe that is the case. There are borderline cases. There are cases where you're going to reject them outright, the protests, as misguided. They may do that with this one. I don't know. If it's just a numbers game, they might be able to show numbers that say, well, we're not losing money. Yeah, but can you do better elsewhere is the real question. If it's dollars and cents for you. If there's a social responsibility, you need to be out. Michigan State University. Surely we have some Michigan State alumni listening today. After posting a 4.3% loss, Michigan State University's endowment moved $100 million from 4 losing hedge funds. Losing hedge funds? How could there be such a thing? Boing. Where's my sound effects? All right. Well, I don't have it at hand. Oh, yeah, I do. There we go. Got to get rid of the flare in that thing somehow. Anyway, after posting the 4.3% loss, MSU's endowment moved $100 million from 4 losing hedge funds, 4 of them, to quantitative hedge funds late last year, half of which went to Renaissance Technologies. At the time, MSU Chief Investment Officer Philip Zetcher, maybe Zecker, he may pronounce it that way, CH, it's not CK, detailed the reasons behind the move to reporters. But the university's investment office and entire board of trustees did not return calls and emails seeking comment about Renaissance investments. At least one student political group is not happy about the $50 million investment. The university should cut its ties with the company, says Eli Pales, or Palace. You tell me about how he pronounces that. A junior year student and press secretary of the Michigan State College Democrats. Yeah, that's a way to be on top of it. Good reading. Well done. Good on you, Eli. I think the university should divest. I think it has a responsibility for its students that the gains of its investment should not come on the backs of its students who are marginalized, he told Think Progress. By investing in hedge funds that are run by people like Robert Mercer, they are directly bankrolling and helping fund these white supremacist entities and organizations. You betcha. You go, Eli. Keep it up. Excellent. I hope you're listening. I hope someone who's listening knows you and you can pat you on the back. Are you on Twitter? Should we find you and say you're cool? Sure. Why not? Pales. And ask him how he pronounces his last name while you're at it. The employee retirement system of the city of Providence, Rhode Island. Are you guys run by Democrats or what? In June of 2016, more than $33.4 million, or almost 14% of Providence's employee retirement system, was invested in Renaissance Technologies Institutional Equities Fund, a fund the system had invested in since 2006, according to a performance update for the city's Board of Investment Commissioners. The retirement system rolls out pension plan benefits to Providence city employee retirees, obviously. The city's finance department and members of the city council committee on finance did not return calls for comment on the investment. I understand. It's embarrassing. Just do something about it. Don't return the calls. Just get out. Who else is up? Next up, it's early there, but surely someone's listening. Justice, you're West Coast. When they wake up in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Water and Power Employees Retirement Plan is mixed up in this nonsense. Renaissance's Institutional Equities Fund was included in Los Angeles's nearly $12 billion Water and Power Employees Retirement Plan portfolio at the close of 2016. The plan oversees the city's water and power department workers' disability and retirement funds. They didn't return any calls. The chief investment officer there is Jeremy Wolfson. He didn't respond to emails or calls. I can kind of shorten this stuff. Did I really need to tell you that the Los Angeles Water and Power Employees Retirement Plan oversees the retirement plan of Los Angeles's water and power employees? Okay. I think we're just filling out space in this article now. Next up, this is based right here. You're awake already. National Academy of Sciences. How can you be funding the most anti-science administration in history? Well, here's how you do it. At the end of 2016, the National Academy of Sciences reported $31.1 million invested with Renaissance. Of course, it's in the Institutional Equities Fund. I don't need to tell you that. And another $23.4 million in the hedge fund's Institutional Diversified Alpha Fund. I don't know what the hell that means, but it's the first mention of another one of the funds, so I might as well get that on the record. The NAS is a DC-based nonprofit, non-governmental organization dedicated to research and public advisory on subjects including math, engineering, medicine, and science. Officials at NAS, guess what? No response to emails requesting comment. But a recent Treasurer's report touted the strong performance of its Renaissance investment. Okay, let's hear what they have to say. The NAS endowment and trust pool outperformed its benchmark, in part due to the strong performance of two of the largest U.S. equity holdings, Berkshire Hathaway, imagine that guy being a genius, and Renaissance Institutional Equities Fund, which outpaced the rising U.S. equity market. Now, if 100% of your money had moved to Berkshire Hathaway, you probably would have beat that number, but okay, maybe not. I'm not sure what Renaissance numbers on returns are. Hedge funds in general, highly questionable. That's what I'm saying. And so you got a basis to question. Did they have a good year? They might have. Might they be terrible next year? They might be. Might Berkshire Hathaway have a bad year? Sure, it could happen. It's true. But in general, the hedge funds don't really seem to be doing that much better than anybody. Plus, they're awful people and use their money for horrible, despicable things. Is there more we should talk about? East Coasters, again, Baltimore Fire and Police Employees Retirement System. Maybe the cops want it, but I don't know. Did the firefighters? Who knows? The body that oversees their benefits, obviously, I won't go into the description. How much? $25 million in June of 2015. According to an agenda for the city's Board of Estimates, the fund's total market value was almost $2.5 billion as of May 31st. Any calls returned? No. Next up, another East Coast institution, the William Penn Foundation. The Philadelphia-based nonprofit William Penn Foundation supports the City of Brotherly Love by issuing grants aimed at providing educational opportunities for low-income kids, boosting its arts scene, and protecting the Delaware River watershed, because the Mercers love all of that stuff, right? Although Rebecca Mercer was once involved in a conservation group of some kind in her basically in and around her house. In other words, a NIMBY billionaire. Terrific. You need another one of those, right? As of 2015, the William Penn Foundation had also invested over $2.3 million into Renaissance's funds, according to the foundation's tax filings for that year. Guess what? No calls returned for comment. Next up, American Physical Society. It's the Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit American Physical Society, which works to advance knowledge surrounding physics, as you might have guessed from the title there. $9.7 million with Renaissance in 2016, according to an audit of the organization's finances. The organization had $186 million in total assets that year. No calls returned for requests for comment. Of course, we learned right up at the top that nobody returned the calls, so I guess we could just leave that part out. Lastly, I should have done that earlier, I guess, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. You hear about them all the time if you're a PBS watcher, right? The country's largest public health foundation. And who cares about public health? Not the Mercers, not Trump. They're murdering people by the millions at this point with their destruction of public health and leaving people to die in a public health crisis in California, in Puerto Rico, all over the place, and it's only going to get worse. The country's largest public health foundation, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, invested over $120.6 million with Renaissance, according to tax filings for 2015. No returned calls, obviously. There you go. Do you know anybody? Are you in any way affiliated with these groups? Do you know anybody you could prevail upon who is affiliated with these groups? Public School Employee Retirement System of Missouri, Columbia University, Michigan State University, the Employees Retirement System of the City of Providence, Rhode Island. They've got Democrats, I'm sure of it. In fact, they dominate the political scene, but whatever. Los Angeles Water and Power Employees Retirement Plan, National Academy of Sciences, hello, Baltimore Fire and Police Employees Retirement System, the William Penn Foundation, American Physical Society, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Do you give money to these guys? Do you designate in the United Way campaign to any of these people? Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, maybe? William Penn Foundation, perhaps? Call them, get the divestment activity rolling, and big kudos to Eli, who might be Eli, what was his last name that I couldn't decide how to pronounce it, Pales or Palace, at Columbia University. Leave it to, was it Columbia or was it Michigan State where he was? Yeah, it was Michigan State. What am I saying? Well, Eli, I would admit you to Columbia University, though maybe you're just loyal to your home state of Michigan. You're right where you belong, but you're clearly smart enough to go to Columbia too. Anyway, amazing that this happens in this day and age. Not exactly the hottest item in the news, but definitely in need of attention and something that I think people could do something about. And hopefully, you'll go do that. Wake up, everybody. Make this happen. Okay, let's see. What else could we have done here? Let's see. There's, we did this story about the crazy situation with the Gold Star families. Yes. Okay, let's get into this here. We're falling behind again on the very fast-moving Russia story. There's angles we're missing out on. Biggest development of the last couple of days on this one you may already have heard about, but one of the biggest, loud-mouthed accounts on Twitter, pro-Trump, like crazy-ass pro-Trump Twitter accounts out there, turns out to have been run directly and exclusively by Russian trolls. And you might have run into this account at some point. And the reason it becomes important becomes obvious in the article. I'll take this one. There are several of them from Mediaite because it was very splashy. Pro-Trump Twitter account with massive clout was run by Russian trolls. I certainly like the headline. By the way, did I put aside other stories in this one? I think that I did. Yes. Think Progress also wrote on it, but I already hit them this morning. And also, they tend to be very understated in things. Mediaite will probably make a splashier story out of this. Here it is. One of the most prominent and influential anonymous pro-Trump Twitter accounts was run by a Russian troll farm prior to being shut down by Twitter, according to BuzzFeed News. Oh, they did this one originally? I should probably just hop over to there because they make a splash with everything. And in fact, their headline is a little splashier. Twitter was warned repeatedly about this fake account run by a Russian troll farm and refused to take it down. I may just flip back over to Mediaite on this one. Okay, what do we got here? According to BuzzFeed News, Russian-run account at, and it's a Twitter account, so at address, right? 10_GOP. 10_GOP. That, by the way, was meant to imply for everyone that it was the Tennessee Republican Party because they identified themselves. You put the address was 10_GOP, but where you put your little identifier name in there, in other words, where I put David Waldman LLC, despite the fact that you reach me by tweeting at KagroX. I don't know what they call that name. I don't know what they call that line. Said Tennessee GOP, and it identified itself variously as, among other things, as the unofficial Twitter account of the Tennessee State Republican Party. And by the way, the Tennessee State Republican Party was, this made sense to me as a possibility because they were super aggressive in their connections to international white supremacy. It was the Tennessee Republican Party that was responsible for inviting Geert Wilders, the lunatic Dutch racist politician, to the Republican National Convention, among others. They for whatever reason were sponsors for tickets for some crazy international super ultra right figures, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, I have questions about whether the Republican Party, now I have to wonder. This went on for a long time. At no point does the Tennessee Republican Party say, hey, that's not us, and take action themselves to remove 10 GOP from Twitter, and they are coordinating with international ultra-rightists. I don't know who's the chair of the Tennessee Republican Party at this point, but that's somebody that needs to be on the Russia watch list, if you ask me, just to be cautious about things. So I know we have listeners in Tennessee. Maybe we ought to get on board with that. Maybe this person ought to be under investigation. Anyway, we've got our break coming up, but this is where I want to return after we play our music and enjoy our musical interlude and 2-minute break for station identification. According to BuzzFeed News, as we were saying, Russian-run account 10GOP was on Twitter from November 2015 until August 2017, a time period that allowed the account to gain nearly 140,000 followers and amass hundreds of thousands of likes and retweets on their posts. What do you find out if you haven't heard this story already? If you have, you're already salivating for it. Who were those people retweeting and liking and loving what 10GOP had to say? We'll tell you about that after the break. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio in our final stretch here today, and I think I'm going to have to remain on this story. I can't give it up. Mediaite's story that I'm reading here. Pro-Trump Twitter account with massive clout was run by Russian trolls, but there's so much more to the story. Let's get on with it. The account often focused, and we're talking here about 10_GOP. That is TEN, as in Tennessee. But they play on the name later on. You'll see about that one. The account often focused on red meat content marketed towards supporters of President Donald Trump and was highly effective in doing so. This included resharing WikiLeaks emails targeting the Clinton campaign, writing hyper-patriotic tweets. And again, I wouldn't even grant them the gift of calling those tweets patriotic. They were not. They were treasonous. And even posting a photo of NBA championship parade and claiming that it was one of Trump's crowds. In other words, some of the worst kinds of fake news out there. The use of photos from other celebrations and claiming that they are Trump crowds. That's one of the more despicable things that could be done on Twitter, quite frankly. Per Twitter archive saved by the Wayback Machine, one of the last highly popular posts shared by 10GOP just before the 2016 election was a WikiLeaks email claiming that Democrats were, quote, paying people to organize violence. And guess what? The Russian trolls behind this account were, in fact, what? Doing what? Paying people to organize violence. Wow, what an amazing thing. The account's original bio was, I love God, I love my country, which was then a change to unofficial Twitter of Tennessee Republicans, covering breaking news, national politics, foreign policy, and more. Hashtag MAGA, hashtag 2A. And after the actual Tennessee Republican Party denied having any affiliation with it, okay, so they finally did do that. I guess that's what forced them to change to unofficial Twitter of Tennessee Republicans, as opposed to saying this person is an imposter and we want it taken down. We just want distance. Okay. Well, at least that answers one of my questions. After being suspended by Twitter, the account then switched to a number of alternative aliases, one of which was 10, the number, that is 10_GOP instead of TEN. And at that point, that account was retweeted by Donald effing Trump himself. He was, quote unquote, taken in by all of this. And that's a big part of the story here. 10GOP as TEN and both 10GOP were retweeted by some of the alt-right's top stars and some of the Trump campaign's top stars, including Trump himself. A very interesting observation, don't you think? I did see this morning Christopher Mims, who is a tech columnist at the Wall Street Journal, noting, well, he tweeted, we can debate its reach all day, but that Russia's social media influence operation became part of official messaging. And we'll talk about how that happened, because we saw Kellyanne Conway retweeting it, Donald Trump Jr. retweeting it, Donald Trump himself retweeting it, and others. The fact that Russian social media influence became part of official messaging means it worked. That is true. It may also mean, of course, that it, in addition to it working, that it worked because, not because the messaging rang true coincidentally with these people who are at the top of the Trump campaign and the Trump administration, but that it rang true to them because it was part of the mission. It was retweeted because it was the very subject and focus of the collusion we've been telling you about for months now. The collusion that I originally was loath to point out as a possibility because it was so goddamn crazy that the President of the United States would have done something like this and colluded in something like this, that I just wanted to approach it cautiously, but now the evidence is just mounting and at this point undeniable. It's more than that Russian propaganda works. It's that many people at the top of the Trump campaign and Trump administration have a vested interest in pushing it, in making sure it works, because they're invested in it and it keeps them in power. It put them there and they think it'll keep them there, when in fact it should get them impeached and imprisoned. But okay. Despite Twitter, to continue with Mediaite's piece here. Despite Twitter knowing about the questionable credibility of the account for nearly a year, it wasn't shut down until last month. Upon 10 GOP's removal from the social media network, many Trump supporters expressed outrage and claimed it was part of Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey's grand conspiracy against conservatives. The subreddit r/TheDonald and Pizzagate truther Jack Prosobiec both demanded answers as to why their friend account, 10GOP, was removed. Answers they now have. It was Russian. But you knew that. I believe you did. Both Twitter and Facebook received heavy media criticism over the way they handled the 2016 election, critics suggesting that the sites did not do enough to stop Russian troll accounts like 10GOP from spreading misinformation and intentionally causing division. Yes, good, true, short article, glad of it. What about the BuzzFeed or original? Well, let's see. Does it add anything to this or not? I do remember seeing a bit of a splash around the banning of 10GOP and lots of people demanding its reinstatement. Not much more in the BuzzFeed piece as I scan it here, but there's more on the Facebook and other social media stories. Let me add this one here. Well, what does the Think Progress piece have to say about it? Because they seem to be more focused on the fact that top Trump officials and Trump himself were dealing with this account. Casey Michael writes for Think Progress, Trump personally thanked fake Twitter account linked to Russia. Among the dozens of fake Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts run out of Russia revealed by the Russian publication RBC earlier this week. Remember, we read about that yesterday. One may have caught the eyes of political journalists, the 10GOP account. The largest fake Twitter account run out of Russia that was uncovered by RBC has become something of a conservative gadfly on Twitter. It's not. It's Russian trolls. With nearly 150,000 followers, the Daily Beast described the account, which called itself the unofficial Twitter of Tennessee Republicans, as an influential pro-Trump account. Twitter, however, recently suspended them. We know why. They set up several backup accounts, including 10, as in 10, GOP, and even one, more hilariously, called 11_GOP. A third account was the 10GOP and shared the same profile picture as the other two accounts, billed itself as providing conservative daily news that you won't find on mainstream media, etc. Hasn't been confirmed as Russian, although it too has been suspended. Google cache searches show that Donald Trump at some point said, "So nice, thank you," and retweeted some of the 10_GOP. So I guess we can hedge things by saying, oh my gosh, they haven't proven that they're Russian, but really, honestly, who else could it be? Anyway, they do say, to be fair to Trump, although I don't know why you would do that, he was hardly the only prominent conservative to boost these fake accounts run out of Russia. In July, Colin Rugg, I don't know how prominent you would say he is, who bills himself as a proud Trump supporter, slammed Twitter for suspending 10GOP for no reason and calling on followers to subscribe to 11GOP. Then also mentioned Jack Prosobiec, etc. Jack, by the way, in case you didn't recognize his name, was the conspiracy theorist who showed up with the Rape Melania sign outside of the Trump D.C. hotel in the hopes that everyone would believe that that was a liberal activist, shades of the earlier attempts, or the later attempts, to try to frame anti-fascist protesters as particularly malicious or even violent. There's many more stories out there on this front that I want to make sure we can include in here. Bloomberg has this piece here. Did I get the original, or do I also have this one open elsewhere? I'm pretty sure I opened something quite like this elsewhere as well. But, oh yeah, Bloomberg. Yeah, that's it. I did have it open already. Facebook and Google helped anti-refugee campaign in swing states. Yeah, this is stuff we've sort of talked about in the past. The big tech companies work closely with Secure America, or rather Secure America Now is the actual name, to target an audience the group felt could be swayed by the message. Here's our problem here. We have platforms like Facebook and Google, which I can understand initially an approach in saying we really need to be content neutral in who we serve and who we serve ads for. are we going to allow people to buy ads that we disagree with? Yes, ordinarily you would say under normal circumstances, well, I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, you want to buy an ad on our platform. We're an advertising platform. That is okay. We have to allow for that. But then the next question is, if you disguise the efforts, or if you say, well, yeah, it's a genuine American-based interest group, how far do you dig into where their finances come from? Of course, if you're getting paid in rubles, you might not have to dig very far. But it raises some serious questions. But it also raises some serious questions about how far should they go to service customers, and whatever happened to Don't Be Evil. Let's read a little bit of the story. Benjamin Elgin and Vernon Silver wrote here for Bloomberg. In the final weeks of the 2016 election campaign, voters in swing states, including Nevada and North Carolina, saw ads appear in their Facebook feeds and on Google websites touting a pair of controversial faux tourism videos, but they might as well be faux terrorism videos, showing France and Germany overrun by Sharia law. What? Why? Because they say so. French school children were being trained to fight for the caliphate, they said. Jihadi fighters were celebrated at the Arc de Triomphe, and the Mona Lisa was covered in a burqa. Under Sharia law, you can enjoy everything the Islamic State of France has to offer as long as you follow the rules, intoned the narrator of one ad. They allowed these ads. Why? Because they wanted money, and they didn't think they were being evil because they were getting paid, I guess. Don't be evil unless somebody pays you enough. Unlike Russian efforts to secretly influence the 2016 election via social media, this American-led campaign, and this is the difference between these others, and I got confused at the beginning here, but they definitely put themselves in a terrible position running ads that were Russian-inspired, Russian-conceived, Russian-paid. This was an American-led campaign, and still you have to ask yourself, is there or is there not a line? Will I accept advertising money that purports, for an ad that purports that France has been taken over by the Islamic State and is running under Sharia law right now? Really? Unlike Russian efforts, blah, 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 this American-led campaign was aided by direct collaboration with employees of Facebook and Google. This is reminiscent, in other words, of the news we heard a couple months ago, I guess, or at least 1 or 2 months ago, about Facebook and Google and Twitter employees embedding in the Trump campaign's digital operations. Then, of course, that charge resurfaced recently after a 60 Minutes interview with Brad Parscale, and everybody was shocked all over again. But it takes time for all this stuff to sink in and to reach everybody. But as my first exposure to it was the BBC interviews, but it was in the same operation. So, I mean, we knew this stuff. But here, Google and Facebook are also embedding with these guys. I mean, really, would you send an embed to these guys? Trump campaign, maybe. I mean, at the time, there were still lots of Americans who thought this was a legitimate major party campaign, and so fine. But what about this thing? Why send people to secure America's borders now, or whatever the hell this is? Anyway, these embeds, they help them target ads to more efficiently reach the intended audiences of racists, I would add, according to internal reports from the ad agency that ran the campaign, as well as 5 people involved with the efforts. The ad agency should have resigned as well, by the way. Facebook advertising salespeople, creative advisors, and technical experts competed with sales staff from Alphabet Incorporated's Google for millions in ad dollars from Secure America Now, the conservative nonprofit, believe it or not, you should lose that status, advocacy group whose campaign included a mix of anti-Hillary Clinton and anti-Islam messages, the people said. The content of some ads left some employees of Harris Media, the Austin-based digital advertising firm that runs campaigns for Secure America Now, feeling uneasy. It was designed to strike fear in people's hearts, said one former Harris employee who requested anonymity. It was also blatantly false, but don't mention that. The extent to which Facebook and Google work with political campaigns and groups hasn't been widely understood. On October 8th, 60 Minutes aired an interview with the Trump campaign's digital director saying he had Facebook employees work as embeds in the campaign who were selected for being Republicans. I guess once you're going to get an embed, it doesn't make a great deal of sense to take people who aren't Republicans. I guess I could excuse it at that point, but maybe there shouldn't be embeds. Facebook said its services for Trump were standard for any advertiser during an important event. Maybe they shouldn't be. Google also works with political groups on their advertising strategies, helping them hone their copy and figure out how to best target their desired audiences, said Wendy Moe, professor of marketing at the University of Maryland's Robert H. Smith School of Business. It's a tricky issue, she says, because once the companies decide they'll do hands-on work for political groups, it's hard for them to say, we'll help these groups, but not others. The issue gets thornier when it comes to working with groups on the fringes of the political spectrum. Earlier this year, for instance, Facebook worked closely with Germany's far-right anti-immigrant Alternative for Germany party, which was also represented by Harris Media. Wow, I wonder how this keeps happening to them. In meetings at Facebook's Berlin office, executives encouraged the AfD and Harris Media to use Facebook Live, in addition to its ad spending, to better target German voters, Bloomberg Businessweek reported last month. Google and Facebook similarly worked closely with Secure America Now as it spent several $1 million on election season ads, according to the people who worked on the campaign. On June 16th of last year, for instance, sales managers from Google's elections team hunkered down in its New York offices with officials from Secure America Now and Harris Media to talk about how to improve their digital ad campaigns. In the months that followed, Secure America Now targeted swing state voters not only with its faux tourism videos, but also ads that linked Democratic Senate candidates with Syrian refugees and terrorists. Stop the support of terrorism. Vote against Catherine Cortez Masto, stated one ad targeting the Nevada Democratic Senate candidate who eventually won the race. You saw the threat, now vote to protect Nevada, declared another ad. Here's a screen cap from one of them with the Eiffel Tower in silhouette against, is it the rising or setting sun? I can't tell you. With a big crescent moon and star symbol up at the top. That's exactly what's going on in France, right? In some cases, the ads were highly targeted on social media and aimed at groups of people such as Hispanic voters in Nevada that they felt could be swayed by the anti-refugee message. Really? According to two people who worked on the campaign. The ads were viewed millions of times on Facebook and Google, according to the internal reports about the campaign. Facebook's collaboration with Secure America Now went beyond optimizing its ad reach and included efforts to test new technology. In one instance, Facebook used the Secure America Now campaign to try out a vertical video format, which the Facebook reps were eager to see used on a larger scale. Working with Harris Media, Facebook devised a case study last year to compare the popularity of the new format to others. The video they used was Are We Safe?, which contrasts colorful scenes of Main Street America with black and white pictures of Muslims who have carried out attacks in the U.S. Facebook tested 12 different versions of the video. It then followed up with a survey of users who had viewed the video to see which format was the most popular, i.e. scary, I guess. Square videos, I guess, as it turns out. Very interesting. Officials for Facebook and Harris Media declined to comment. Secure America Now didn't respond either. Google also declined an interview request, but a spokesperson for the company says Google eventually blocked several ads from Secure America Now for violating its policies, which they should have seen up front, right? Including ads for the faux tourism videos. The company wouldn't say when it blocked the ads, but in a written statement it said that if ads violate its vigorously enforced policies, yeah, right, we immediately disapprove them and stop showing them. Well, thanks a lot for not being evil over there. There's more. Let me get to a couple other stories that have been waiting in pocket and see if we can't add to the narrative before closing things out for the day. Let's see. Other things that we need to... yes, we mentioned yesterday, of course, the Russian troll factory that was paying U.S. activists to help fund protests during the election. You know what? I have to include that one. That was from... I included those links, or gave them to Scott to include in yesterday's roundup. The Guardian... And who else was it reporting on that one? BuzzFeed's approach on that one. But we didn't read enough into this one because I think this ties up a couple other loose ends here. Sean Walker's story in The Guardian was what I was reading a little bit of yesterday. Russian trolls posing as Americans made payments to genuine activists in the U.S. to help fund protest movements on socially divisive issues, according to a new investigation by RBC. That was the Russian media outlet. But getting down to some of the specifics of this stuff. And maybe the BuzzFeed piece might be easier to use in order to get right down to specifics. But there are a couple of examples given, some of which are more interesting than others. One target, BuzzFeed says, of this operation was Micah White, co-founder of Occupy Wall Street. When he was contacted in May of 2016 by a man named Jan Big Davis, really? That would have been a red flag for me, who represented himself as a freelance reporter, he didn't think anything of it since he often gave interviews about activism. According to emails seen by BuzzFeed News, Davis said he was writing for a site called Black Matters US, which had over 200,000 followers and focused, quote, mostly on racism and police brutality themes. Entirely plausible. In its report, based on interviews with current and former employees of the troll farm, as well as a source close to its leadership and internal documents, RBC found that Black Matters US was linked to the Internet Research Agency. The Black Matters site, which is still up, features awkward language throughout. Its contact page tells those who would reach out, quote, "You are exactly that person who can help us figure out not only the top stories, but also the events that are really important to an ordinary African American." The group did not immediately respond to a BuzzFeed News request for comment. Although the group's main site is still live, its Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook accounts have been suspended. RBC said Facebook suspended the group's accounts as part of a purge of 470 accounts run by the Internet Research Agency. Andy Stone, a Facebook spokesperson, told BuzzFeed News he was not able to confirm that the groups were suspended as part of the purge. Davis wrote to White requesting an interview. "We admire the job you did on the protest movement in the U.S., he wrote in an email seen by BuzzFeed News. When they spoke on the phone the following month, White said the connection sounded as if Davis was calling from a long distance. His accent sounded strange. He assumed he was probably speaking to an African man. The idea was that a Russian was the furthest thing from my mind," White told BuzzFeed. The questions Davis asked him in the interview also sounded different to him than the questions he routinely gets from reporters. White said that after the story was published on the Black Matters site a few days later, he didn't think any more about it. But Davis continued to call and email him for several months and asked him to promote some events. White said that since the interview had been so strange and the piece hadn't particularly resonated with him, I just kind of ignored them. In August of 2016, Davis emailed him about a flash mob dedicated to the Move 9, the members of a black radical group that formed in the 1970s who are currently in prison. You know, the Move House from Philadelphia. "I hope you will share our aspiration to bring attention to Move 9. 7 of them are still alive," Davis wrote. "They were in rows of the first people who fought with police brutality because they were worried about the safe future of black kids." That's not too stilted, right? White didn't respond. "I support Move, but it's also outside the normal concerns for black activists, I would say," he told BuzzFeed News. Maybe older ones would have it more in their wheelhouse. I don't know. I would not have said that, but okay. Maybe, I don't know. The following month, Davis emailed him again, asking him to share information with his audience about the case of Jerome Ski Smith, an African-American convicted of a murder he says he didn't commit. "It is really the case when only simple sharing can save his life," Davis wrote to him. White also didn't respond. Davis emailed him one final time to tell him that the trial had been pushed back and again asked that he share the information with his audience. "Thank you for being a part of this. Together we are creating history," Davis wrote to him. An email sent to the address for Davis that corresponded with Weiss went unanswered. Black Matters US also contacted other activists such as Conrad James, who runs a nonprofit based in Raleigh, North Carolina called Living Ultraviolet. James told BuzzFeed News that Black Matters US reached out with a message from its Facebook page rather than from an individual member, asking him to speak at a rally in September of 2016 after the death of Keith Lamont Scott, a black man who was shot by police in Charlotte. "I thought it was a knockoff of Black Lives Matter," James said about the name, but when he looked at their website, they looked legit. You think? James said that when he found out there was no organizer for the event, he offered to organize the rally himself and was told by the page's manager to contact a woman named Stephanie Williamson, who he described to BuzzFeed News as a spokeswoman. While James said he found this odd, the only other detail that struck him as strange was a white man who he said accompanied Williamson and never said a word or smiled. Other things checked out, however. Williamson gave him a bank card to pay for expenses, such as microphones and speakers, James said, and the permits for the event appeared to be in order. James said he also organized the second, larger rally in October for Black Matters US that took place in tandem with the national set of protests organized by the NAACP, the ACLU, and other groups. BuzzFeed could not immediately track down Williamson. A video hosted by the Black Matters YouTube account is titled Stephanie Williamson at BM Charlotte Protest. James said that he no longer has Williamson's contact information. Unclear whether Williamson herself was tricked into participating. James said he didn't find out about the group was linked to a Russian troll farm until he was contacted by reporters from RBC a few weeks ago. But it was angering, James said, that they were using black culture here in America as a springboard for a divisive tactic and strategy. One more specific example. See how much we can cram in on this one. The troll farm was also linked to a group called Black Fist, according to RBC. Black Fist's site says that the group teaches black communities self-defense, or as the Black Fist site put it, organized by black for black. By black for black? The website is still up, though its Facebook and Instagram accounts have been suspended. The group did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Facebook also declined to comment on Black Fist's page being taken down. Be ready to protect your rights, the site reads. Let them know that black power matters. One of the trainers listed on the Black Fist website, Omowale Adewale, I'm guessing at the pronunciation again, Adewale perhaps, says he was directly contacted by what he now knows to be the troll farm to hold courses in New York City. This is where it becomes particularly interesting. He's been active in politics for years, his personal website says, and he's also an MMA fighter. His Instagram feed is filled with posts about civil rights and his vegan lifestyle. A fourth person who was also listed as a trainer on the site but did not wish to be named said they had no connection with the group and was unaware of their listing. Adewale, and in an interview with BuzzFeed between personal training clients, said he was first contacted by the man he knew as Taylor via his Instagram in January of 2017 to teach 4 self-defense classes a month. Though he was initially wary, his concerns dropped once the first payments came through, $320 a month. Adewale, like White, described the man with whom he spoke over the phone but never met as having an accent from the African continent. Okay. Understandable. Anyway, look, long story short, since we're running out of time here, I wanted to bring this up. They essentially were asking them to hold these training sessions, and in the meantime, we're planning to tip off white nationalists with whom they were also working, these Russian trolls, to the fact that these defense classes were taking place, and play it this way. Oh my God, look what the blacks are doing now. The blacks, of course they would call them. They're organizing for violent uprising and violent protests. They're so violent, just like the anti-fascists are violent. We got to stop these guys before it gets too out of hand, even though we are, of course, paying for them to do such things. And what a convenient setup that was. Wow. Well, more and more being revealed each day about Russians, their troll farms, and the extent to which they influenced events on the ground in the United States, up to and including getting top Trump campaign officials and Trump administration officials and Trump himself to retweet their propaganda. It's almost like there was a conspiracy to do so. It's almost as if there was collusion between them. It's almost as if they united on message for some strange reason. We can't exactly put our finger on it. Anyway, as I mentioned, time for us to hand over the microphones to the guys on the after show. I ate up more of their introductory time as well, but I assure you of this, the Thank God It's Jovadi version of the after show is always a great one.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Here's a good one for their lead story. HIP Health Plan of New York sends a letter to a 9-month-old boy explaining why he's too expensive to keep alive. So, Merry Savage Christmas, you little brat. Amazing story. There's much, much more, of course, following this. Batting cleanup, as always. Wink and Justice will take it from here.